in. So I do this little tap dance while they're coming online with a
Yeah,
smile so that people, if they see me, they see there's some live activity
I
going
think
on
Eric Greedy
and
struck the
maybe they
right
stick
balance
around. This is a
between
little feedback that
presentation and
naturally
formal presentation.
appears. The feedback's gone. We're clean. We're ready to start. If you are watching us on YouTube and you'd like to be notified next time we have an interview for the B2B Lead Gen podcast or the Earned Media podcast, like and subscribe. That way you'll get a notification when we go live. Let me just grab my notes and we are going to start our interview. Welcome. My guest today is Steffen Hedebrandt. He is the Chief Revenue Officer at DreamData.io. He has a lot of experience building customer journeys, mapping customer journeys, measuring customer journeys. His company, Dream Data, is actually a platform for measuring customer attribution, but don't worry, we're not going to give you a hard sell. I'm going to ask him all sorts of questions about revenue attribution models, how to make it work, what are they? We're going to start at the top, so don't feel like you got to be a hardcore geek to understand what he's going to say, because he's going to break it down for you and make it real easy to understand. So what we're talking about in this podcast today is this concept of revenue attribution, the idea that you'd somehow be able to see how much money you make through the different channels you're active in digital marketing. I'm sure, since it's what he does for a living, he can explain it much better than me. So, Steffen, in digital marketing, what is revenue attribution?
Oh, yeah. First of all, thanks for the invite to the show, Eric. I'm really happy to be here, all the way from across opposite side of the world. I'm in Copenhagen, Denmark. If we just start very from the top, attribution, as you can call the discipline we're in here, is about understanding, or it's the search for an equation that you can kind of repeat. So if you do A, B, and C, you can expect revenue to come out of it. So the reason why I find attribution so interesting is that I constantly want to find ways to kind of grow the businesses I'm involved in. So if I understand which path the customers took towards signing a deal with us, I can hopefully repeat it and get a lot more customers to start that journey. So that, I think that's kind of the very overall introduction to why I think attribution is such an interesting discipline. It's kind of the holy grail of marketing, to be able to explain, I did this, and then this happened, and we made money. That's my starting point for the interest in this topic.
So, a lot of people from outside of digital marketing, when you say digital marketing, they think of social media, or maybe people who are a little bit more familiar might think of search engine optimization, right? So let's talk about first organic search marketing from a B2B standpoint. If the wolf's at the door and you need deal flow fast, can search marketing support that goal?
Yeah, 100%. So by search marketing, you mean like Google Ads?
Sure. Let's start there, and then we'll talk about search engine optimization.
Yes, yeah. So those two. There's one where you have to pay Google $1 every time, and then there's the one where people find you organically. The good thing about Google search is that, or for certain types of businesses, it can be an incredibly good channel, because there's typically a search behavior associated with it. So, say for example, at Dream Data, for example, we do a B2B attribution. So if somebody writes B2B attribution tool inside of Google search, then it's very likely that the intent of that search is related to buying a product like ours. So, or if you're selling a pair of running shoes, if somebody Googles white Nike running shoe, then it would be pretty nice to buy that, click to your web shop, because you know that the intent behind this search is so strongly correlating to making more money. Does that make sense?
Let's talk about keyword intent for a bit here. What do marketers need to know about keyword? What is keyword intent, and what do marketers need to know about it?
It's good. Yeah, just ask me all those kind of questions here, guys. Sometimes I get a little bit too far down the rabbit hole right away. But intent, by what I mean by that, is the like intent to complete a purchase by whatever you search for. So if you do the running shoe example, then if you search just for running shoe, you may be trying to find the history of what is a running shoe and how did, like, was it Nike who invented it or whatever. But if you write, I think there's a running shoe called Nike Pegasus blue size 9, then that intent behind that search versus just searching for a running shoe looks like somebody who's wanting to acquire that product. So there's certain types of searches that are very broad that is probably not correlating with somebody who is looking to buy a product. And like, at least the marketing school I come from, marketing is about making money. So you want to be addressing those kind of search behaviors that looks like somebody who's in the market for buying whatever you're selling.
When you think about keyword intent, you feel as though branded keywords are typically higher purchase intent than unbranded keywords?
I think overall I can reply yes to that. For example, like if somebody writes dream data, we're pretty unknown for most people, but if you actually know about our company and put it into that search engine, then you're really, really looking for our company. Hence, the intent will be really, really high.
But that's not really search engine optimization, because Google gives you that one for free.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're measuring, if you're saying, hey, we want to start coming up in search results for people who are looking to solve problems that our product can solve, but they don't know about us. Is that a long game, or can those types of leads actually convert quickly?
So this, I think, is very so there's, let me break it down in two buckets. So there's Google search ads, which you can pay to get on top of the search result. And then there's Google organic, which is the non-ad search that is the first one to be represented there. Typically, that's what people refer to in Google Analytics when they look at organic traffic. That can take a long time for it to go through the ranks of Google. When you publish a new page and Google needs to index it, and you probably need a few links pointing toward that page to move it upwards. So that's kind of the behavior in Google. Then it's also about what's your typical customer journey inside of your company. Because, for example, at Dream Data, an average purchase takes like 3 months or something like that. So when I buy that click, it's gonna be 3 months before the client is gonna sign the contract. So what I'm trying to say is that the nature of your business sets a kind of a limit of how fast you can convert your marketing activity into like real money. At least in B2B, it's different when kind of in B2C, where kind of you're in control of what the consumer does a lot more.
I know you do a lot of work in SaaS, software as a service. That's kind of a sweet spot for you guys at Dream Data. So in terms of a SaaS company, let's talk about like a SaaS company. They just got their Series A round closed. They've got a board of investors. They want results, and they want results fast. What are going to be the quickest ways for them to start generating revenue?
How broadly are we speaking here? Are we speaking marketing tactics or just anything?
Yeah, or let's say anything. Like if they bring you in, you're no longer CRO of Dream Data. Now that you're at this company, and they say, hey, we need fast action. Which channels, if we devote resources to them, are going to result in revenue quickest? Are there any generalizations you can make, or could you just sort of think out loud about the questions you'd ask or how the
Yeah.
rubric you'd use to figure out which way to go?
Yeah, so there's two tactics that comes to mind. One is just like good old school cold calling, based out of a really like a thorough work on what's your ideal customer, knowing who is the best fit for whatever your product does. So, for example, at Dream Data, we say it's like B2B software as a service companies that are between 50 and 500 employees, preferably funded companies. And then you need to speak to the VP marketing in these companies or the marketing director, that sort of person. And then you can actually just like pick up the phone, call them, start pitching, and see if they want to have a meeting with you. That can be a very fast tactic to convert people into meetings that then can convert into money. The other thing is trying to capture the highest intent you can find around the internet. That will typically be like very specific Google searches for whatever industry you're in. It can also be paying for traffic from review platforms. There's a review platform called Capterra. There's a review platform called G2. Because the people who have gone that far down the funnel and actually are reading reviews, comparing different services to each other, they are very far in their decision-making journey. So paying for a click from these places means that the buyer has already done a lot of research to make a decision on which product to purchase. So that's kind of the like top of mind, the fastest way to impact your revenue or like to build pipeline. But you know, there's 1,000 other tactics, and this was just a really generic example.
Talk to us about the difference between anonymous versus authenticated user tracking. Because, obviously everyone you see in Google Analytics is anonymous, but, if you're in another platform that we can talk about in a moment, you can actually measure a specific user's activity and map their journey to becoming a customer or not. So talk to us about the differences between anonymous and authenticated user tracking.
Yes, I think this is something that is kind of an understanding that is gaining momentum nowadays on the internet. If you do a little bit of Google Analytics history, Google Analytics, which is like, the analytics tool 99% of everybody uses, and it's a nice tool. Google Analytics is actually reporting on individual devices. It's not reporting on Eric or Steffen. It's reporting on the computer I'm sitting at. So a returning visitor is actually a device that is returning back on your website. But since Google Analytics was built, I think we went from having one device per person connected to the internet to maybe 3, 4, 5 devices per person connected to the internet. And this is a problem if you want to be very data-driven in your actions, because Google Analytics starts to become a little bit limited in its ability to describe what's going on. Like nowadays, like a consumer would probably, like buying a pair of running shoes, maybe you sit on the phone initially doing a little bit of research. Then you go move to your couch and sit with your iPad. And then the day after, when you've decided what you want to buy, then you open up your computer and then you purchase the product. That would look in Google Analytics like 3 different people doing something. Whereas actually it's the same journey that those 3 devices are part of. Now, if you wanted to, when the purchase then happens, the person who is buying your product is probably just typing in your website's URL into the browser and hit enter. That's going to look like somebody who came directly into your website and bought your product. It's nice that you sell something, but from a stimulating demand, growing your pipeline, your revenue, you don't have any indication of where the journey actually started. And to get more customers, you need to know kind of where your journey starts. So this is some of the problems about only looking at anonymous devices. Now there's a rise of a technology called customer data platforms, which enables you to say, look, Eric, he has this email. We can see this email is being used both on this computer and on this phone. So whenever we see one of those two devices, it's still Eric doing both of them. And this will enable you to go back, and if the purchase happened on the computer, but actually was started on the phone, you'll be able to track back to what were the kind of marketing activities that got Eric on his phone, starting to do that research. Does that make sense, Eric?
Let me ask you another question.
Yeah.
If I had a stack that had a WordPress site, and maybe I have a chat bot on there where I'm taking in customer information, and maybe I use pop-ups, and maybe I have forms that feed into a CRM.
Yeah.
And the CRM also has a tracking code published to my WordPress site.
Yeah.
And that's telling me, length of visit, first page visited, where they came from. And I'm sort of home running. And let's say I'm using a email marketing platform that's integrated with my CRM, so I can home run that data to the customer record in my CRM as well.
Yeah.
What would the advantage of having a customer data platform be over just home running all that data into my CRM on my customer card?
So that's a good question. I think essentially, so I'm not, maybe if you're really good with the data and CRMs, you can actually make that work. I'm not like 100% sure you wouldn't be able to do that, but let me try to think this through.
Because there must be a use case for customer data platforms over and above what the CRMs can do, or people wouldn't be using them.
Yeah, so I think I'm just confusing a few. It's the ability to join several different devices into one identity or to one person. So let's say in this example, what we typically see is that when you, like what you're talking about is what probably you could call a single touch world, where kind of the last thing that happened before somebody signed up to something and then becoming a customer, ending up in the CRM. That would, in the example I gave, that would be somebody who came directly to the website and then converted into an email of some sort. But what typically takes place is that there's multiple sessions involved in buyer's journeys. Not a lot of people buy, particularly a software product, the first time they come to the website. It takes multiple visits. They're probably also buying as a team. So the guy who needs the product has a boss, and that boss has a procurement manager. And then suddenly there's 3 or 4 or 5 people involved from that company. So just tracking what the one user is doing with his one device that signs up to an email becomes a very scattered image of what's going on. I don't know if that hit the point, Eric.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about Google Analytics. I think it would be helpful because I know a lot of our listeners are Google Analytics users and probably dream of someday having something as cool as a customer data platform, but maybe aren't there yet.
Yeah.
So from a Google Analytics standpoint, you've got these different sources of traffic that are recorded. That's kind of, how they break it up, right? There's paid, there's organic, there's referral traffic, there's social traffic, there's email. And then there's this category they call direct. What is direct?
So direct is everybody who either types in the address of your website and just hits enter. that could be a one way to go into the direct
does,
bucket.
because you can search in the address bar. So
Yeah,
even
like,
if
and also
you're
like,
typing it, Google finishes it for you, and then it's not direct.
yeah, it could also be like you just want to go to Amazon.com because you know that brand, so you don't have to, so you don't want to do anything else. It could also be that you will lose the tracking information on its way to your website, meaning that the UTMs are dropped as the user clicks. That typically happens in like if you send a newsletter or an email to your customers, a lot of the email providers doesn't automatically glue a UTM to the click. So it looks like somebody who just came directly to a website that was actually triggered by an email campaign that you ran. So it's every visit that comes to your website without no information about where it's coming from.
So
and they're kind of, yeah, just to finish that off, you can say if you sell something, it's still nice because you can pay your salary for another month. But the whole problem about not knowing where sales comes from is that it gets hard to repeat. And we want to have repeatable stuff. We want to have predictable stuff when we do business, because that's how we know we can pay salary the next month as well.
So I'm trying to update my knowledge here, because I want to say 10 years ago, it's probably 10 years ago, that I had Justin Catroni, who at the time was not working for Google, but now who's one of the major guys at Google Analytics on this program. And he said direct means unknown. Direct means we don't know what the hell it is. And so we put it in the direct category. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much what I tried to explain, at least, that it's somebody who arrives to the website without information about where the person was coming from.
Is there a way to minimize your directs?
Yes, so that's being very disciplined about always ensuring that anybody you send to your website has information about where they're coming from. Most of the ad platforms do this out of the box, where they say, now I'm sending this guy to your website, but I'm also sending information about what was the campaign ID there, and you like the channel that it came from. When you're sending a newsletter, as the example I gave before, you need to make sure that if the link is clicked, they're not just arriving at ericswebsite.com, they're arriving at ericswebsite.com dash some kind of UTM that indicates where's this traffic coming from.
And UTM stands for Universal Tracking.
I'm not even sure, man.
But I know that if you search Campaign Builder on Google, actually website,
UTM Builder,
set up a UTM code on a URL. The thing is, it's so much extra work to have to do that manually for every link in every blog post, every guest post that you put out there, every email that you put out there. And I know the advertising on the paid side, the platforms do have it built in, but a lot of times on the organic side, they don't. Do you have a way of dealing with this? How do you do it manually? How do you handle it?
So it depends on your business whether it's important or not. So kind of for some businesses, you can live fine without. But if you want to be like really, really data driven and really try to make decisions out of what is the data actually telling you should do next, then you really need to track, to have as little direct traffic as possible and more traffic sorted into these buckets of organic, social, referral, etc. So it's kind of, if you're selling through word of mouth, if you're selling like consultancy services, etc., it's not necessarily important, but some more of these, the modern tools out there, they are actually like automation marketing, email automation platforms are also adding this tracking out of the box as well. So say you're acquiring a new piece of software for the commercial side of your business, I would just be asking the vendors, like, how can you support me understand what's going on? How do you track activity when my customers will be using this product, etc.? It's kind of like it's a commitment to track as much as possible. So also another example, a little bit different. If your salespeople are just cowboys sitting with their own phone, calling phone numbers, then they also leave no trace of what they're actually doing. You could ask them to move into like a piece of calling software technology. So every time they hit dial, some note is taken
Sure.
that you called this account and you spoke for this long. So it's a little bit of like committing to a behavior that leaves traces in order for you to know what kind of seemed to grow your business. I don't know if it makes sense.
In terms of Google Analytics, are there any sort of modifications that you always make out of the box to, get it working better? Is there any sort of like what are the big shortcomings, and are there any ways that you generally, try to minimize them when you're setting up GA?
Oh, I'm not I don't know. I think what you should be aware about with GA is that if your customer journeys, the time it takes to make the decision around your product is very short, then GA can actually explain you pretty well what's going on. If you're in this scenario where it's multiple people, that takes 6 to 12 months on making a decision on whether to buy your product, then GA is becoming very limited. So I think my first recommendation would be to consider the sales cycle of whatever you sell. If it's very long and complex, GA becomes more scattered in the information that it can give you. If you're selling something you can make a decision upon quite fast, then GA can be good. And then next advice would just be to make sure that all the traffic that ends on your website actually has information about where it comes from. And in internet terms, that is setting those UTMs so they can tell you after the fact where the traffic came from. I don't think there's any way around it, Eric.
Almost 10 years ago, they introduced something called multi-channel funnels.
Yes.
Which, tries to tell you the path that a customer took. The problem is, of course, the frustration is direct, because it's one thing to look at last click attribution, meaning last click means what was the last thing they clicked on before they bought something. You can look at that and you can say, well, this much money came from search, this much came from email, this much came from referral, this much came from social. Knowing, of course, that it may not have been the only thing they clicked on. They could have clicked 30 or 40 times before that last click got the conversion.
Yeah.
The problem is when you look at the top conversion paths, which is also a default view in Google Analytics, you see
looking at it now. Yeah.
And so, of course, direct is the wild card. The minute you see direct in the path is useless. You don't know anything. So I always take direct off the table and redo my percentages so I know where the money's coming from. But in terms of paths, it's always a frustration. How could a customer data platform change that?
So I'm just trying to think whether I should speak of inside of Google Analytics or outside, because as you can say, there's very little of the traffic that in reality will be completely direct. If you're able to understand the full journey of, like, let's say you visited Dream Data's website 6 times, then the first visit will probably be maybe you clicked an email, you came from an ad, we chatted on LinkedIn. So the first touch would be one of those. Then because we've identified you and we know who you are, then the next time you come to our website directly, we know that you're not just somebody who came directly. We know that you're actually Eric that came 2 days ago. So every direct visit would actually be pointing towards you as a person. So you would know that Eric's journey actually started back when he came from that LinkedIn ad. And then the 3 next visits on that where he's there directly is actually coming from that LinkedIn ad initially.
So when you take all data into your platform for customers, obviously, the attribution you can return is only as good as the data that goes in.
Yeah, 100%.
One of the things I see a lot with email marketing platforms, particularly lately with cybersecurity on the, or cyber insecurity, hacking on the rise,
Yeah,
is, you get a lot of false positives in email marketing platforms
yeah.
where, the corporate
So
email
many now. Yeah.
pulling it in and analyzing it before it distributes it to the client.
Yes.
And so that looks like an open, it looks like a click. You think you got this super user at Microsoft. No, he's just got really good security.
Yeah.
So have you seen that? And what platforms are doing a good job to measure that nowadays? How do you get accurate info around email?
So I think most of the platform actually work quite nicely still, but I think you're completely right that the open rate is the most flawed metric now because of the things you just said. I see, we use HubSpot when we send emails at our company, and we can see like the moment I sent the email, it looks like the user opens the email, and it's like when you send that to 100 different people, not all of those 100 is just sitting there waiting for an email from me. So I think that metric of the open rate is incredibly flawed nowadays. The metrics of people who clicks inside of the email, people who reply the email, etc., those I at least consider to be okay, legit still. But the open rate one is don't celebrate that somebody, as you said, looks like he's opening it immediately.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, you actually need to see the email being opened 2 times before you can actually trust that it's been opened.
Pro tip: if you want to sort of debunk your super users, send a 3 a.m. campaign and see if and that's really
Yeah,
a way to see, what's going on. So let's talk about this idea of multi-touch revenue attribution. What
yeah.
is that? What's multi-touch revenue attribution?
So if we start by the multi-touch, that's kind of the journey that we talked about before, that somebody comes firstly on a phone, next time you see him is on his computer, next time is on his iPad. You want to be able to understand who this user is, and you want to understand like if he needs to go to your website 5 times before he buys, then you need to know that that's actually part of the same journey. Instead of look it in Google Analytics, it could look like 5 different people coming to your website. So it's a matter of actually understanding the full journey in the context of what's actually going on, instead of it looking like 5 different events.
And so
the last thing would just
yep.
be when we speak about revenue attribution, we deliberately do it as opposed to talking about marketing attribution, because like we're in B2B, and clients doesn't sign 6-digit contracts out of a click on a Facebook ad or a Google ad. They're doing it as a result of like a team effort in your company. You ran some marketing campaigns, you got the attention of the customer. Now sales are talking with them. Now customer success are replying FAQs. And you want to take all those touches that are generated across the whole company and then do attribution to them, because only when you understand all the touches that the account has, you actually can understand the true journey. And at least now we'll make meaningful decisions on, because you can only, as a company, you can only spend your dollar once. And if you can get more money by hiring a customer success rep more than buying 10 clicks on Google, then you should probably hire that. We're trying to say holistically, you only have a certain amount of money available, and you want to invest them where you see the biggest return on investment.
So we're talking sort of indirectly about revenue attribution models. This idea that, there'd be a first click, there'd be a series of clicks, and then there'd be a last click or interaction, or some way that you interact with the customer before the sale occurs. And I know you've given a lot of thought to different revenue attribution models.
Yeah.
So talk us through, kind of think out loud for us in terms of how do you decide which revenue attribution model works for which types of company?
Yeah, good. So I think the first point here again is that all attribution models are wrong, because none of them are gonna be able to explain you 100% of what's going on. So you can say it's a statistical method to support your decision making, because the decisions you can make is only as good as the data available for the models. But say you sold something for $1,000 and you have a last touch model, even though the journey is 10 steps. Given a last touch model, you give 100% of the last click on that 10-step journey, saying that that was worth all the $1,000. Is that fair? Probably not. But it's at least what that attribution model is saying. Then the opposite of that is saying that you could use a first touch model, which is assigning all of the $1,000 to the very first click out of the 10 clicks. That would probably be just as unfair, but it would at least give you an indication of where did the journey start. And then there's all sorts of other models. There's a model where you call it a linear model, where you say, let's give equal credit to all the touches we know of this buyer journey. So if there's 10 touches and you have $1,000 deal, then you give $100 to each of the touches. And the reason why you're trying to do this exercise of finding out or attributing money to each of those steps is to find out where is the good return on investment really.
I have a multi-channel funnel question. I'm not sure if you can answer it, but I'll ask it anyways. Sometimes when I look at top conversion channels, or no, top conversion paths,
yeah,
sometimes I see that a channel has a higher assisted value than attributed value. How could that be? How could a channel contribute more as an assist than as a last click?
So I'm not too familiar with Google Analytics, to be honest. So
Fair
I
enough.
might have to pass on how they
I didn't mean to say, yeah. I should.
No, it's okay. It's just because we have our own tools. So I'm not spending my days in Google Analytics now anymore.
Yeah. So look, I know it's tough to generalize, but based on your experience as a chief revenue officer,
yeah,
which leads generate more revenue? Inbound leads or outbound leads? Go to, or leads that come to you?
So in theory, it should be the outbound leads that bring the most revenue, because you decide who you call, as opposed to you cannot decide who's searching for attribution tool. But I can decide that I'm only going after companies that are of a certain size. So I know if I book a meeting with this company, the deal size is also very likely to be X. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In theory, at least.
So I want to give you, I think we've had a great conversation. I appreciate you taking the time. I want to give you a second to tell us about your platform.
Okay, thank you, Eric. So essentially, we help B2B companies understand their customer journeys. And the way that we do that is that we built a cloud database on behalf of these companies that plugs into every tool that touches the customer journey. In a B2B company, that's typically a CRM system. It's a marketing automation system. It's a customer success tool. Maybe they have a calling software, a webinar platform, etc. We pull over all of the data being generated in each of these silos. And then we clean the data up and organize it, all the touches by users that belongs to accounts. So you get to see kind of, when did we see a person the very first time on this account? How long does it take for them to become a sales qualified lead? How long does it take to close the journey, etc.? And so in essence, we help B2B companies with multi-touch attribution, you can say.
If you're profiling your ideal customer target, are you more interested in best of breed stacks, or are vertically integrated stacks just as lucrative an opportunity for you?
So the best fit clients for us is clients that has a lot of tools, because that's where the customer journey gets more scattered. So let's say you use HubSpot, and you use HubSpot for marketing, for customer success, and for sales. Then all of the data lives inside the same ecosystem. But if you use HubSpot for marketing, Zendesk for support, and then you use Salesforce for your salespeople, then data on the account starts to live in different silos. And that's a good fit for us, because then we can pull it out of the silos and give you a nice, clean understanding of what's actually going on.
But can Salesforce invoice a client? Does Salesforce have financial accounting software?
No. What
So I
would
would
you need
think,
that for?
I would think every HubSpot, I'm sorry, I meant to say HubSpot. Does every HubSpot has no accounting software. So
Oh,
how
no.
would you get the revenue side in HubSpot if you don't have the
So
accounting?
HubSpot actually has a complete CRM inside of it as well.
Can you invoice?
No, you don't invoice there, but we take the, sorry, yeah, I hadn't specified that, but we take the amount that you set on the deal in the when you move it to closed one. So it's, yeah, so it's not actual
projected
money.
revenue. It's not actual
Yes,
revenue.
exactly. We can, though, like through other mechanisms, pull in what have you actually received in dollar value, but we take the amount, move to the closed one, and then attribute it back to the different touches.
Got it. Okay.
Good nuance.
And if someone wants to check out your platform, what's the best way for them to do that?
That's dreamdata.io, and there's even a free tier, so people can just go in and give it a try. We only work for B2B companies, so I'm sorry if you're you in a B2C scenario, then we can't help you out. And then just find me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to reply any kind of questions that might have popped up during the show.
Awesome. Steffen Hedebrandt, CRO for Dream Data. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Eric. It was a really big pleasure.